Hey Superkid Commanders, thanks for joining us. Here we are in the balloon room of our Superkid Academy, and we're talking today about discipline and specifically our process of discipline and the steps that we take. Like you would have seen in our previous videos about boundaries and the fact that Superkids have fun, that following that we do want to have rules and boundaries in place, but when rules aren't obeyed, we need to have some consequence. Then there needs to be a discipline action that we can take after somebody's been disobedient or has gone against our rules here. So that discipline process, as we said, I just want to start off by saying that we do everything in love, that when we discipline, we do it out of a heart of love. We are never doing it out of a heart of aggression. We are never disciplining out of a heart to control or a heart to hurt. We are only ever doing it out of a heart to love and train our kids and say, hey, I want you to be more like Jesus. Discipline is a part of the Bible. There are so many scriptures which talk about leaders and parents disciplining and bringing in rules. And it is a God-given concept to discipline when needs be. God disciplines his people. It doesn't mean we enjoy discipline. It doesn't mean that we do it because we want to, but we do it because we love these kids and we want them to be more like Jesus. And the only way they will train and learn the only way they will learn and grow is if we can train them. And one of those ways of training is through discipline. But I want to say at the start that if you are ever about to enforce the discipline, if there is anger in your heart, if there is aggression in your heart, I want you to check yourself. And if there is anything in your heart that should not be there, then I ask you to stop, and we'll discipline later on. We only ever discipline when we are doing it out of a heart of love. Okay, so what are our discipline processes? What is our procedure? We are putting this in place for two things, for yourself and for the kids. For yourself, so you know that you have a method, that you have a way, you have a safety net to follow. We're not just putting you in a bunch of kids. You're not here to babysit. You're not here just to look after kids. The goal of Superkids is not to keep the kids in this room. The goal is not so the parents can enjoy church. The goal is for us to join along Breakthrough in our vision of training and equipping and raising up ambassadors who can influence this world. That is our goal. That is what we do at Superkids. So if that means that if a child is disrupting that process, then we need to do something to take them out of that process. We need to do something to take them out of this room, because we're not here to keep kids in this room. We're not here to leave you in here to suffer through anything that they might throw at you, or verbally or physically. We're here to say, hey, we are training and equipping, and we have got a purpose and a vision in this place, and that is what we're doing. And if a child needs to be removed from that because they're disrupting that, then that's fine, because that is all a part of our purpose and our goal here and our vision. So I want to encourage you to say, don't worry, it is okay to discipline. It is okay to take a child out of Superkids, because that we're not here to babysit. Secondly, we're doing it for the sake of the kids, because like we've said, the kids need clear goals, they need clear boundaries, they need clear procedures. If they understand what the rules are, they understand what the consequences are, and key thing is we are consistent with those consequences and we are consistent with enforcing those rules, then they will be able to rise, they will be able to improve, they will be able to say, hey, I understand how I can be good. I can understand how I can be more like Jesus. I understand now what I need to do to get better or to improve in this way. But if we're inconsistent, if we don't have rules, then they don't understand. So what is our discipline process? Okay, we're going to have some steps. We're not doing a specific rules, because every situation is different, but we have 3 steps that you can go through. The first step is a gentle warning, that if a child is misbehaving, we always start off with just a gentle warning. Say, hey, you know what? Remember, at Superkids we have fun, and what you did just then did not represent that. You were disobedient. I asked you to come and sit at the table, and you grunted at me and kept playing on the floor. No, that's not what we do. At Superkids we have first time obedience. So this is your first reminder. Come on up to the table and let's try that first time obedience again. Or a kid does something else. Hey, remember, we're never disrespectful here. This is a warning and a reminder that we have fun here. After that, after the warning, the next step is a timeout. So we're not giving a rule as to how many warnings they get. Generally I would say 1 warning, but it can depend on the situation. But after warnings, if a warnings don't work, the next step is a timeout. So that just means you get a chair, you put it on the side, you say, hey, you've got a timeout. You need to come and sit because you once again disobeyed me, or you once again were disrespectful to that person, or you once again said this when I asked you not to. Now come and have a timeout, and I want you to think about what you've done. So they'll come and be separated from the group. The time that they can be separated from the group and sit in the timeout is up to you. We're suggesting anything from 1 to 5 minutes. 1 to 5 minutes, it completely depends on the situation. It depends on how many warnings they might have had. It depends on the seriousness of what they've done. It might depend on the child themselves and how many times they are often being disciplined in a class. It is up to the commander to use your discretion as to how long that timeout needs to be. But you say, hey, come and sit down, have a timeout and think about what you've done. Then you would bring them back into the class by having a small conversation with them and saying, hey, why don't you come back into the class now and try again. The next step that we would go to is to go back to church, is to be sent back to church to sit with their parents or their guardians or whoever is in charge of them for that meeting. Because like we said, we're not babysitting. They don't have to stay here the whole time. This is not compulsory. They're coming here to learn and to be trained to be ambassadors. And sometimes that might mean that, hey, right now you're disrupting that process for everybody else. You need to go back to church. So how you would do that would be, we ask all our commanders to have their phone with them all the time. I want you to text their parents or guardians or whoever's brought them. But then secondly, also text one of our hosts for the day, whoever has been on the door, and just say, hey, send a text to say, hey, I need you to come and get your child. That way the parent should have their phone with them. They come and collect their child. Otherwise, if the parent doesn't have their phone for whatever reason, the host will get it as well, and they'll be able to go collect the parent from church, and they can come. And you can just say, hey, look, I'm going to have a conversation with you after church as to what caused this, but this child needs to go back and sit back in church now, and they're not allowed to come back into Superkids for the rest of the lesson. That might sound severe, that might sound harsh, and I don't want us to get to that step quickly, but it does need to be in place. We've said in general, we will go through the process that you'll have warnings, then you'll go to timeout. You can have multiple timeouts in a lesson, but not many. If a kid's having 5 or 6 timeouts, then we say, hey, it's time to go back. It's time to go to the next step. And then we would go to that step of being sent back to church. But there are a few occasions which we are saying it is up to the commander's discretion, where it is okay to go immediately from an act of disobedience or something bad to getting sent to church. And the 3 times that's okay to just go immediately back to church is one, if they have been actually abusive, physically abusive or harmful to other people. If somebody has thrown a chair at another child, that would be instant, you go back to church. If they are actually harming the people around them, then it is okay to go straight back to church. The second time would be, like we said before, when they've just had multiple timeouts and they're not listening. That's okay to go back to church, or if they refuse to do the timeout. If you say go and have a timeout, and they refuse to, they grunt and they keep on doing what they're doing, then okay, you can just go straight back to church. If they're not willing to have that next step of punishment, then it's okay. They can just go straight back to church, or up to your discretion. If there is a time when they have done something when it is just appropriate to say that was at a level that it is not okay for you to stay in this room anymore, you need to go back, then that's okay. I trust you. I'm asking the commanders will make that decision. That's not an assistant's job, that's a commander's job, and that's part of your role of stepping up into that job of leading the room, and that is at your discretion. I ask you to use the Holy Spirit to guide you in that time. Now, the only other thing that we ask is that there is a follow-up to punishment. A gentle warning, it's fine, that's all they need. A timeout, or going back to church does require a little bit of follow-up. It doesn't have to be long, particularly if it's just been a timeout. Now, you might not have time in the lesson because you've got other kids you need to teach. I don't have time to step away and have a 2-minute conversation with a child. You might say, hey, come on back to the table, but after church, before you leave the room, I want to have a quick chat with you just to discuss what happened. And that conversation just has to be short and just goes over the facts that, hey, do you understand why you had to have a timeout? Do you understand what you did wrong? Do you understand how what you did not fit in with our philosophy that at Superkids we have fun? And just discuss it with them. And then secondly, following up by saying, hey, I know that God has made you such an incredible person. I know Jesus has got such a great future ahead of you. And we had that time out because we love you and we believe in who God wants you to be. Can I pray with you? Or, can I just have a quick prayer to say that Jesus to help them moving forward in who that they're wanting to be, and say, you know what, we love you. You're an awesome guy, but we want you to understand why we did what we did. So it just has to be a couple of minutes, but just some closure to what has happened. And then the last thing would be that if they did have to actually be sent back to class, to church, then it would require a conversation with the parents. That would just mean say, hey, after church, have a really quick chat with the parents to say, hey, this is why they were sent back to class. This is what happened. These were the steps that led to this time. These were the things I had done. But this is what happened, and this is why we had to send them back. But once again, enforcing the fact that, hey, we're doing this because we love them, because we know God's got a great future for them. And at Superkids, we want to train them into that. We don't, we want them to learn to be who God's called them to be. So that's our discipline process. The fact that we've got gentle warnings that step up to a timeout, that step up eventually into going back to church. I really appreciate all that you do. Thanks, commanders, for sowing your time into these kids, and I really want to empower you with that, and to be confident that you're here for a reason. You're here to lead these kids and to train them, and you can do this through God. Thanks, guys.